Hello everyone. Can you go back to the first stage, the first page? The one before this? Yeah. Hello everyone. My name is Manfredi Anello. I'm an architect in private practice and I use Vectorworks. This presentation, I am an architect in RAI. I've been practicing for 19 years and I used to teach Vectorworks second year student in UCD, and I'm also a reseller for Computers Unlimited in Ireland. But mainly I just want to illustrate how I use Vectorworks in my practice in my everyday work. To sum up quickly, Vectorworks is a combination of specific tools that make up a software which has been around for a lot of time, since 1985. In fact, I actually used it first in 1987, then went back, used other softwares when I was working in other practices, but I've been using it since and I find it very handy to work with. And in this presentation, you'll learn about basic things, how Vectorworks facilitates and enhances the design process. Second, how Vectorworks uses BIM in a project. Then I will show you one of our projects with Vectorworks from inception to completion. And we'll give you some illustration of the interoperability and sharing with Vectorworks, and then some myths and popular beliefs about Vectorworks. I must say, from being at this conference, your mind expands and contracts all the time, because it expands when you get fed information, then it contracts when you realize how little you know. And I find that I could relate to the little BIM and big BIM, because I think I work on a little BIM, I work on projects of all sizes. But I can also work, I don't just work with Vectorworks, I work with a suite of software. We enhance projects with Photoshop, we change things around, we use presentations. So I think that's part of the big BIM. And with this we're able to do projects here in Ireland, in Italy, in China, in Brazil, exchanging information at all levels of every type of technology that we can use. I have been working, as I said, Minicad since 1987. This is a project that I did in 2007 and we got an award, the Opus Award. I'm always keen, being an architect, I like to work, I like to sketch, I like to draw, and I like to pass on the material to the people that work with me and to stakeholders at any stage. And I'm very keen that everything is legible and can be understood and can be built properly. I'm also a conservation architect and an advisor with the Heritage Council, and I've been involved in a number of very complicated conservation projects such as this one. It took us nearly a week to survey by hand. We didn't have any incredible tools. And then with that we made a 2D model, then we made a 3D model that we used in this was a study that we carried out for the Heritage Council on the green approach to conservation of a protected structure. So we had studies of, we also used heat loss studies, and the process was very complex and it was completed successfully. Now we'll start in earnest. This is how Vectorworks facilitates and enhances the design process. The design process, I like this. I'm going to read this because I think it's interesting. An architectural design is a complex and multifaceted process that hovers between the first rough sketches and the execution on site, dealing with any number of external constraints and the ability to convey their clear concept at every stage of the project. I stress to convey this. I mean, the last speaker just spoke about 10%, 0% tolerance. I mean, your information has to have zero tolerance. You have to be able to convey exactly what you're trying to say. So we used to work like this. Architects like to think of ourselves as this, artists in beautiful studios. We're still not far from that. This is a project I'm working on at the moment, how protective structure refurbishment. We do the basic sketches, which are done by hand, they're very emotional. Then we start to make 3Ds to study the massing and how things work. With Vectorworks and CAD and BIM, we're able to put all that together into a model that you can then work with at any stage. You can cut it into pieces, you can hack it up, you can add things to it, and then you can work with the constraints, which are either the client's or much more difficult constraints such as these, building regulations and planning regulations. But it's a cooperative work between you and the design team and the client. Vectorworks facilitates the design process because every step of the way, you're able to interface between your initial concept and sketch. You don't have to stray very much from the creative and working process as an architect. We sketch. We used to. I mean, when I went to college, I did the first multimedia thesis in the University of Palermo back in '93. I was told I couldn't use computers, because you had to draw by hand. Yeah, so we learned to overlay, and we think in overlaying. Whichever you think about it, yes, you do design a 3D model, but at the same time, you have to section that in your head so that you can give it the 3D, and you have to give it the fourth dimension, which is the way a project will live after it's built in the future. So, as I said, this is a project that I had nearly finished on site. I'll just give you a quick intro on it. This was it's an outpatient centre for cystic fibrosis Ireland in Drogheda. Very small building. It's a paediatric outpatient. It's only 3 rooms. There was a complex detail that we studied. That's a basic model that we did with Vectorworks, just to show the clients and the stakeholders. In cystic fibrosis, they're incredible. They can raise 30 grand in a month, but they are a machine, and they need information to raise funds. So we made loads of models and things to show what was happening. Then we went to tender. The project is on site, and that detail is now resolved in that. We're using 440 by 50 mil bricks with line pointing, and I had a fight with Ipstoke trying to work that detail because it was a tricky one, because it's a seam in the brick to express. As I said, for fundraising, we prepared a few models and a bit of information, and this was used early stages of the project just to see what was going to happen. It's a tiny house that abuts the hospital in Drogheda, and we made this model, and it actually looks exactly like this. I don't have pictures of site because it's pretty dirty at the moment, but it looks exactly. It came out exactly as we expected, and it's a very, very interesting, very, very large space for a very constrained site. So just to go quickly on Vectorworks, uses classes, layers, stories, and the model. That's how you work. The classes, the layers in Vectorworks are basically sheets, physical sheets that section the building. And in that, just like that, you have a building, a model which is made up of different floors. Then in the layers, you use classes, which is what layers will be termed in AutoCAD, for those of you who are more familiar with AutoCAD. And the classes can then be identified in each layer and suppressed or shown or hidden. For example, that drawing shows layers with the objects class. So I can turn the ball class off and I don't see them. And then you have, on the organization sheet, you have the design layers, which is where you actually draw. The sheet layers is where you present. The classes, the viewports, and the last but not least, the references. You can also reference to other programs and to other files. This is what a page in Vectorworks would look like physically. You see, you have all of these are all viewports, which are snapshots of each layer or floor. And each of these are editable, so I can show a different layer or a different floor or not, or I can show a different class. So if I don't want to see the windows, I can take them off by working with this palette here, which is the one on the right hand side, which is the organization palette. And basically this all belongs to a model which can be shown at any stage. There's some blurb. And then Vectorworks is basically a suite of different products, because you can use a designer, which is the complete works, architect, landmarks, spotlights, and fundamentals, and renderworks. Renderworks allows you to do renderings such as that, which is a white card render. It looks like a real model, like a paper model. And of course it is OpenBIM and IFC compatible. In a project you can use a Parasolid modeling, which allows you to do things like this. You can do the clip cube. That project before, you can section it. You can actually move back and forward the section line, so you can actually see it's like a little X-ray, like a CAT scan, and from that you can make sheets that you can then print off as sections. The stories work like so. You basically have this story command forms layers, specific layers for your you can set any layer you want for a ceiling, for a floor, for any texture, or for any level that you want to section the model at. And then there's quite powerful PIOs is plug-in objects, like the stairs and windows and doors. And then modeling, navigation has become really easy. 2D and drafting age, you can draft in 2D and 3D and annotate. Very good site modeling, which recognizes GIS and any type of import. You can make very good site model and then section it whichever way you want it. And the rendering capabilities are very good. As I said, we don't just use Vectorworks, we use also other rendering softwares. This is a project from inception to completion with Vectorworks. It's a school extension. Basically, the brief is in the center. Small school, small element of the school, needs to be expanded. Some sketches. These looks like post-rasterization sketches, but they're not. There were studies that we did to see how, in 2D, see how the model will work, what it would be like to extend the school upwards. So to understand it better, nearly immediately, we made a model in Vectorworks which we could photograph or see or model, physically model and move around any time of the day, and we can actually set the dates. And then we put in our model, our proposal, and see how that worked. Then we worked on shadow analysis they are for March and September. This is the before and this is the after, to see how very little changed. And again, we're always going back and forth from drawings to physical model to presentation. So a sketch, the facade sketch, how it would work, it's south-facing, so we put succulent panels, PVs and louvers, and this is the 3D, this is a Vectorworks model, and with that we were able to do a Photoshop model of the other facade. We were able to interact quite seamlessly with the engineers and the fire consultancy. This is for fire search, and we made sketches. We studied them with the engineer, and then we worked how that would work with Vectorworks, interfacing all the time, changing, mostly in DWG, but we were able to exchange all the time information. And this is what the tender drawings look like, with plans, sections, details, and information for the succulent panels, which you had to order from Canada. Just a very specific tool. Then going into interoperability and sharing with Vectorworks, the worksheet integration is very good. It's very basic and allows you to exchange information with a lot of different other users. The publish command is quite good because it allows you to make a batch print of PDF, DWG, DXF, and print as well. Every year there's a different way of dealing with DWG because DWG updates all the time. So this year's Vectorworks works very well with DWG. And of course we have IFC zones and IFC XML support, which has moved a lot. I did a competition in Norway in 2008 in IFC. We had to present an IFC model and it was a nightmare. Now it's very easy to export and import from IFC. And to finish, myths and popular beliefs about Vectorworks. Vectorworks is not mainstream. There's 450,000 users. I know it's nothing compared to AutoCAD. I think it has 10 million users. But Vectorworks helps people. There's a few names that I wanted to drop. Rogers, Ajayi, Chipperfield, Zoomtor, and Libeskind all use Vectorworks. I know some engineers use Vectorworks as well, not just architects. And it's hard to find candidates who know Vectorworks. It's not hard. I mean, yes, it is hard. It's a lot easier if you get somebody who uses Revit or AutoCAD. But we've successfully trained a number of young architects and technicians who have gone on to just love it and get their own copies. It's not accurate. There was a myth that I heard a few years ago. And accuracy in global references, everything is greatly improved in the new versions. Of course, like every tool, I use Vectorworks like I use a pen or a pencil. Like every tool, the way you use it makes it work for you. What are the Vectorworks modules? They're basically a way of, if you have like 10 stations in your practice, or you have 3 stations or 1, you can buy the different modules, so that if you have somebody that can do all the renderings, you buy RenderWorks. If you're somebody that does, so you can actually split the load of instead of buying a package for 5 full versions, you can buy different versions that have different uses. It's become expensive? No, it's still nearly half the price of comparative CAD softwares. Thank you, and for more information, my details are there.
Okay, any questions for Manfredi? I thought it was really good to see. I think it's really interesting to see. I hope there's not any Autodesk people here, but without being rude, it's nice to see there's a life beyond Autodesk. You know, I think as much as people focus on Autodesk products and all that stuff, and there's a lot of talk about Revit being the market leader and all those sorts of things, it's not always all about Revit. The future is about sort of interoperability, open BIM, exchange of information, collaboration, doing all sorts of things. So it's really good. Thank you. Any questions out there? Otherwise, we'll break for tea early.